All right, welcome to this episode of the It'll Buff Podcast. I'm your host, Dan Grachowski, and today joining us is Corey Reiser. He is a former field artillery officer who has made an awesome, successful transition from military service to entrepreneurship. And as we've mentioned in the last, episode 21 now, when we had our first episode of this series with Joseph, this is So You Want to Be an Entrepreneur, and reached out to Corey, and he's doing some awesome things. And so we'll just kind of continue. So he served active duty for 10 years. He's a proud graduate, as well as I am, of the prep school. The prepsters stick together, man. We found a way to do it. We found a way to get through, and that grit and tenacity has carried us to where we are today. And then in 2011, he graduated from West Point, where he played lacrosse. He was a lacrosse athlete there. And then he went on to serve in the 101st Airborne Division, 3rd ID, and then he completed 2 deployments before being assigned as ROTC instructor in Columbus. And then this is where it gets interesting. While he was in Ohio, Corey built a profitable real estate portfolio and short-term rental company, which allowed him to successfully exit the Army in March of 2022 and pursue his entrepreneurship endeavors full-time. Currently, Corey looks to grow his company, Early Risers Stays, to the #1 short-term rental company in Columbus. Corey is expanding into long-term management, building a unique option for investors seeking to maximize profits in real estate. And then additionally, he looks to work with veteran transition programs to educate and train transitioning service members on how to get started in their own journey into entrepreneurship and then help them achieve financial freedom. Quite the introduction, Corey. You have accomplished a lot, and I know it's only beginning for you. So welcome to the podcast, Corey. How you doing?
Thanks, Dan, man. I appreciate it. This is very cool. The When I saw your stuff on LinkedIn, I was like, man, this is going to be awesome conversation, somebody going in the same direction. And when you get around those types of people, you just kind of compound and it just goes on forever and grows. So I'm excited to be on, man. Thanks for having me.
Of course, Corey, and again, I just again after that brief intro, you are obviously a very busy man, so I really appreciate you taking some time out of your day to sit down and just have a conversation with me. And so, to all listeners out there, this is going to be the second episode of the So You Want to Be an Entrepreneurship series, and I'm really excited because, as you guys have heard me talk about, the transition from active duty military service to civilian life is something that's not easy. There's all sorts of stressors. There's all sorts of things that as things that we try to overcome. And one of those things is am I going to this financial stability, right? Am I going to have money to carry me through to landing a job? And sometimes people take chances on internships and they don't pan out, and then they're looking around like I did. That was very much my story, and I'm like, okay, well, now what do I do? Thankfully I had some reserves saved up, and my wife's she's a successful entrepreneur herself, so we had some resources there. But what Corey's doing and what we're going to walk through is something really cool, and I'm excited for him to dive into that. But before we get into that, we're going to go all the way back to young officer Corey, and we're just going to pick his brain and really kind of figure out, Corey, okay, what really kind of motivated you to want to get out of the military, and then as you're getting out of the military, what was the thought process? How did you get into what you're doing, and then really kind of how did that shape this idea into, okay, yeah, I actually want to be in entrepreneurship, and this is how I need to set myself up for success.
Yeah. So you want me to go back to like childhood, how I ended up in the Army?
Dude,
Do
let's
reset?
just go. Let's go as far back wherever the story needs to begin to really paint the whole picture. Let's go do it.
Sure. So few people I don't think really know this, but I have really only wanted to do one thing in my life since I was in, I honestly, as long as I can remember, it was go to West Point, play lacrosse, be in the Army. That was it.
Let's go.
Like my whole high school, I mean, I went to St. Anthony's on Long Island. Those colors are black and gold. I've been black and gold basically my whole life. And I can honestly say, very fortunate, a lot of hard work, a lot of support, but I accomplished like my only vision of my life at 22. I was like, just graduate from West Point. That's it. Like I didn't I didn't apply
What's next?
anywhere. Guidance counselors told me I was crazy or told me I was crazy, but um, that meant so much to me. Just like that was it. So I didn't really look much beyond there, other than like I liked the army. I love playing lacrosse, and that was pretty much it. So once I graduated, obviously commissioned as an FA officer, did the whole basic army regimen. I was an FSO. Did all the artillery jobs. Did my first duty station, one small deployment, and then ended up at the Triple C. Thought seriously about getting out. Then I'd actually had a packet to go in and be like a TAC P, like switch over to be an ALO.
Oh, nice.
That I didn't ended up going not going that way. Then I got stationed at Savannah, and that's kind of like the second half of Savannah is where I kind of really like started scratching the surface of like what is this whole other thing out there, kind of like real estate and entrepreneurship. Um, did a deployment there, and really like just before that deployment and on that deployment I started reading a lot. Had a lot of downtime. I was in an aviation unit, so it was about as good as it gets. um, Read Rich Dad Poor Dad, started watching a lot of YouTube videos, and Rich Dad Poor Dad was the drug. Like that was the thing that kind of helped me see the world other outside of like, 9 to 5. There's like this whole other world out there, right, that you can kind of create.
Mm.
um, so, and I resonated with that specifically, and I think you might even find it too. So Robert Kiyosaki's background, he actually went to Kings Point and played football. So his kind of story parallels mine, but I'm just like a generation or so behind him.
Okay.
And like he went to Kings Point, played football. I went to West Point, played lacrosse. He went to Vietnam. I went to Afghanistan. And then we both kind of like came back. And then it was like at that leaping off point. It's like, what do you want to do in life? What do you like doing? Um, and then he went and did other stuff, but along the entrepreneurial route. So for me, I that second half of the time that I was in Savannah, I started looking at real estate. A friend of mine was actually a classmate, had started on Airbnb, and Savannah's beautiful city, tons of
Oh, yeah.
travel there. It's right off 95. So I started messing around with it. I had 2 units. I had two extra bedrooms. They shared the bathroom. That was like 2 units. So kind of got started on like the little entrepreneurial. I don't even know what you want to call it, like a little flint, Tinder to start the fire. But
Mm-hmm.
that's how I got started. I just started messing with it there. Um, then I was paying rent, which was fantastic. I was learning more, and I started feeling like, man, this is fun. Like I enjoy doing this. I like showing people Savannah, introducing them to all my favorite restaurants and bars and restaurants. And then I got orders to Columbus. So I traveled to Columbus once. My first time I went there, I drove from Savannah all the way up to just check it out. Fell in love with
Okay.
it like immediately. Never been there in my life. There was like a buzz to the city. There was this really cool strip. Like Short North is an awesome area, tons of businesses, tons of travel and leisure. And I was like, oh man, I think I can do this. So that was kind of like the start. It was like a warm start in Savannah. Then when I got to Columbus, full time, I'd be teaching, and then if I wasn't teaching, I was building on the side.
Let's go. That's
So
awesome.
yeah, it was it was a rough. It started off great, and then we had this thing called COVID, and I
Yeah.
basically what I say to myself is I picked like the hardest thing to build from the start. So like the real estate side is a little bit separate, but I picked a hospitality company and started it just before a global travel pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
So that was like I went up and then like pretty much rock bottom, but I have fun like down there because that's where I do all my learning. I think, most entrepreneurs say that it's a very uncomfortable place to be, but if you just look down the tracks and you're like, there's something else out there, and I'm just going to keep going along this. You build that infinite mindset of like it doesn't matter like what happens to me right now. I'm going to learn through it, and from 0 to 22, and then I got out of the army at 33. Like I never stopped doing the army, and that's all I did. So the way I look at, building all of this stuff is just, I'm not going to stop I'm gonna get better as I go. It'll get harder, but I'll get better and hopefully stay ahead of that learning curve.
Man, that's I really appreciate that insight. I think it's interesting how when we think to ourselves, when we plan out, we have this idea. Joseph, the guy we just had on, he said it really well, and it was this idea of entrepreneurship looking backwards looks really easy, right? Like all the dots connect, and
Yeah,
you're like, oh yeah, like yeah, of course, it looks really easy, and then like everybody looking at Corey is like, yeah, that was so easy, and then you're like, no, man, like
it's
it,
tough.
it's one of those.
It is definitely tough.
It's one of those things where you sit there and you're like, okay, I'm gonna go on this journey, I'm gonna do it, I got it, and here we go. And then it's like for you, right? It's like you had no idea that this global pandemic that was just gonna shut the world
No idea.
down was just gonna. And what's always interesting, right, is I talk to people and they're like, well, I want to go get my MBA, or I want to do this, or I want to get that certification. And I was like, there's no amount of knowledge in the world that's going to prepare you for something like that.
No.
And it's all about, to your exact point, and I think that's what entrepreneurship is. It's like if you look at the great entrepreneurs out there, it's okay, they set out to do something, they got hit with extreme adversity, and they're like, okay, look, I can't control the external circumstances that were presented to me in this situation. What I can control is how I respond and how I learn from this. And my previous boss, the president of my company, his biggest mantra was, "It's only failure if you don't learn something from it," and that's something
Or if you
to this
quit.
day. Yeah, that's something to this day that I was like, I hold on to. It's like, it's we're getting used to this thing where it's like, well, we need to make it perfect before we release it. It's like, no, just go do it, go figure it out on the
Yep.
fly, and that's what makes it awesome. So now you said, so you went to Triple C, and you were half tempted to get out at like right after Triple C. So what was it? Because Five and Fly is not only just about getting in the army; it is also kind of talking people through. It's like, hey, there are these, again, to kind of what you're talking about, and what we're going to continue to uncover in this episode. There are these ways where if you play it smart, you can set yourself up for success if you stay in the
Yeah.
army a little bit longer, right? So you went to Triple
Yep.
C, you went back to lovely Fort Sill, Oklahoma. You had a really awesome opportunity to go be a TAC P, which is like, if you're a fister and you work.
I was like, yeah, man, I just want to go do that. Like, it just sounded cool. I was like, I get cool like gear. I was like, ah. But
So yeah, why didn't you go do that? Kind of
I,
what's.
yeah, great question. So I found out that I was going to Savannah, and I was like, I'm just gonna go do that. I was like, I found out that I wanted to stay light. I was still kind of gung ho after the Triple C. 101st broke you down a little bit, but I was just like, I want to stay light. I like the mentality, and I knew that Fort Stewart had a light brigade.
Mhm.
So with my background experience, I was kind of hoping that like, oh, maybe they'll see that I'm like competent and like being on the light side, and I'll get put there. So the only slot that they had was for the aviation squadron, which was the 64. So I was going to be the FSO for them, which is interesting because it's like you and FSNCO and like 213 Foxes, and that's it. And that's like the battalion or the squadron FEC. So show up there. They're like, oh, this guy's got a Ranger tab, did a deployment or whatever, pulled me from that assignment and put me down at Fort Stewart in the Light Brigade. So I was still pretty happy with that. I was like, I get to be, a battalion FSO. That's going to be, fun. I enjoy doing that stuff. So it was after that that kind of shaped the next couple of months and, I'd say the next year. I was, by that time, being down at Stewart, Stewart just beats you down. You're in the middle of a swamp. And I was like, all right, this is it. End of the line. I went through the Triple C. So I was having beers. There's a guy that lived in my building. I was having beers with him. He brews his own stuff, and he was like, "Yeah, man. Like, there's a position open for a headquarters commander. They're deployed. It was with the cab." And I knew that it was like the wrong answer. Like I was supposed to go through my boss and do the whole rigmarole. And I was just like, "Dude, put my name in for that. See what happens." The next day, I get called into my boss's office, and he was a rock star, by the way. Like this was one of the top officers that I've ever served with. Calls me into his office. He's like, "Hey, I heard you're looking for a job up at the cab." He goes, "You ready to deploy? Like, you okay with that?" He goes, "I think it's smart." You'll get some good experience. You'll get to take command. You'll deploy. And I was like, yes, sir. Like, that's exactly what I was thinking. We were overstaffed, so it was like a no-brainer.
Yeah.
So he sent me, he's like, yep, you're good, signed it. And I went up to Hunter and then deployed like 2 or 3 weeks later. So on that deployment, I was a headquarters commander, and they don't really have. I'm doing like inventories, and like I have the headquarters section because
Yeah.
like the headquarters company, like S2's got a tactical mission, S3's got a tactical. Like everybody has their mission. So I just found myself working out a ton, adding value, and helping where I could, and I was reading and learning. So I read all these books. I was like bigger pockets. I was learning all this stuff. So that was like that set a really good base for me education wise and knowledge wise to when I got back, then I was like, okay, I'll start this.
Yeah.
So started there and then kind of closed out in Savannah, moved up to Columbus, and then just hit the ground running there. And I knew like what to touch on what you said before. So you do, 1 to 5 years or 1 to 10 years, in that span, the in my experience, the number one thing you can do to build a base, like a foundation for you, is house hacking the VA loan.
Mm-hmm.
That is like it is like a superpower. If you do it right and you learn enough and you can be mobile, you're kind of like a like nomadic. You buy one, live in it for a year and change, then you can go move to another one, and then you get 2 or 3 doors under your belt. You can do 2 quadplexes if that works for you. But I basically saw that as like I'm gonna build equity in something, give me a little nest egg, and I'm also gonna like max it out to the point where I live in it for the required amount of time. And then once I move out, now I have a cash flowing, it's a business. Like that one property is a business, right? And then the way I kind of reverse engineered it was I knew that I could get out and let's say my living expenses or my living expenses today. Like I'm 34. I did design it this way. Like I'm single. I don't have a lot of responsibilities outside of, me, myself, and I. But
Mm-hmm.
my living expenses, food, water, shelter, everything that I need to be very comfortable is like 3 grand a month. So I brought my living expenses down to nothing, and I've stayed that way for the last couple of years, and that's helped me compound so much faster and build a base, which was I was like, okay, I've got enough. I built my confidence up. Have enough confidence to just leap right out into this. Worst case scenario, I off a property. I sell a property, and then the way I started looking at it was like days of supply. So I would just be like, okay, if I walk away with 20, 30, whatever off of the sale of that property, right? How long can I get, 18 grand gives me with my living expenses 6 months of flight time,
Yep.
right? And I knew that I could go pick up bussing tables for 15 bucks an hour and I'd be just fine.
Yep.
So, but I knew that I wasn't going to do that, but you can always fall back on getting a job. But I really just started like rationalizing in my brain. I was like, I'm not getting any younger. I feel confident enough to do this. And I just leaped. I built a little bit. I built the hospitality side, Airbnbs and short term rentals while in. And then that real estate was really what helped me like be fortified and feel, comfortable enough to just leap out. Like not go to any corporate job, like just since March of 22, I've been doing this full time.
That's awesome. That's so
So,
I yeah, that's man, that what a huge crucial piece of advice that I think a lot of people need to hear. I think there's this like glorification of getting out of the army and like living lavishly and having all this stuff. And I talked to a guy at Lockheed Martin, and he was like, man, there's so many $100,000 millionaires out there who like flex all this cash or debt, and it's like but they're like scrapping for change, and it's like, dude, what are you doing? Whereas you shape this mentality, creating this lifestyle before again taking that leap, which is crucial. And I think as I talk to people, and to all those people listening out there, that's really a practice you should start doing especially like I tell people, I think the 24 month like mark is like the key time to really start figuring this out. That gives you time to be like, okay, to your point, even if they don't have real estate, right? You can start to build this nest egg because you're going to want it. And then hey, if everything goes smoothly, great. Now you can go take that nest egg and you can go invest it in a property or whatever you want to invest it in. Pick your poison there. But
Yep.
that's such a huge piece of advice, and I think so. To all listeners out there, just really sit down and think to yourself, okay, what are the fundamentals that I need? And that was a lot of what I just did, leaving the company that I was at. I was afforded an opportunity, and we kind of had this conversation before we had this podcast. But
Yeah.
Corey and I were talking on a phone call, and it was that mentality of, okay, here's a guy that's had two successful companies. They sold for a lot of money. He's an entrepreneur. He's done it. So I had an opportunity to go kind of be under his tutelage. Now, Corey and I were saying there's this mentality of like, hey, like, even if it comes to just cleaning toilets to get a 30-minute conversation, like that's worth it. I was fortunate enough to, get a full paycheck and learn a lot and see a lot of what happens between like creating these MVPs and having to figure out how to price things and figure out how to scale and figure out like when to grow your own company and how to get investment
Yeah.
funding and all this stuff and building a board out. So that was extremely, insightful for me. And I decided to take that step, and I was kind of, whatever. I had equity in the company, et cetera, and was kind of looking, that was going to be my nest egg. And as I was going to leap from there, but things kind of unfolded, and I said, well, we're going to go take on this entrepreneurship journey now. And so when I was leaving, that was what I did. I sat down and it's like, okay, what are my living expenses? And, how can we reduce
Numbers don't
things to
lie.
the limited. That's it. That's so true. And if two prepsters can figure it out, then you smart people out there, you guys can figure it out too.
That
So
that is it.
go ahead.
No, that's how I think. Is like I want to use myself as the example of like, listen, man, like I am not above average. I'm very average. I was a not a great student. It took me 5 years to get through college, and not a great GPA. And I was just like, look, this isn't rocket science. This is very, and like a big thing that I kind of tried to wrap my head around was like, look, I don't have some like original idea. I'm not gonna, at least right now, maybe in the future, but like I don't have some like proprietary tech or like some Uber or like some billion-dollar unicorn tech company idea. What I do have is I know that I can do stuff. I can fix things. I can be like utilitarian, and obviously like the whole grit side and like the hard work that just the army, that whole journey instilled in me. It's like a service-based business, right? I'm providing a home for somebody. If I do a good job with that, somebody's going to want to stay there and they're going to want to rent from me, right? And I knew that if I just applied myself, if you just pick something and start learning about it, you don't have to. That's like the biggest thing for like the veteran crowd of like people getting out. They're like, well, I don't want to be. They see entrepreneur, I think like Mark Zuckerberg. It's like, no, man, like you can have a couple of doors. You can have a couple of doors, right? And then the more you learn about it, you can get really creative. Like you can partner on the VA loan and get co-signed. There's so many interesting ways of doing this. And then you always know, like if you graduate and you get a college degree, you can you can go out and get a decently paying W-2 job. If
Mm-hmm.
everything falls apart, you put your hustle factor to work and you can go get a job. I always knew that I could go back and do that. But I didn't want to get comfortable in doing that. I wanted to just go, into uncharted territory and kind of test myself again. So, but that was the biggest thing is like, I'm not anything special. I'm just trying to do something. I pick something and try to do it to the best of my ability. And that is still entrepreneurial. Like I'm still doing my own thing. I don't answer to bosses. I do my own thing. And if I make it, fantastic. I get a little bit of credit. If I don't, that's even better because like as long as you don't, die, live to fight another day, right?
That's it.
And it's like it's not gonna, do stuff with a clean moral conscience, and you're gonna be just fine. And you're gonna learn so much. Like I learned so much from watching it go up and down and things that I should have seen on like home inspections, like all these like little nitnoid little things. I'm like, oh my God, like this has made me so much better because every property that I've purchased, it gets better and better. I'm finding things, I'm asking for better stuff and deals. Like you
Mm-hmm.
if you really focus on just knowledge and the practical application of knowledge, you are unstoppable. If you put it in your brain, it's like I might fail a dozen times, but if you don't quit and you stand up that 13th or 14th or 15th time, you're standing, man. Like you're out on it. Like you're doing it.
That's no, that's so true. I every time I hear this kind of keep fighting mentality, I go back to playing football and Coach Monken when he came on board. He brought this I don't even really know what you call it. We'll call it a pump up speech. But what we'd always say is before we get ready for a football game is I'm going to fight, and we would kind of say it over and over again, and then we
Yeah.
until I can't fight anymore. And then if I I'm gonna lay down, I'm gonna bleed a while, and I'm gonna get back up, and I'm gonna fight some more. And it doesn't to the listeners out there, it doesn't matter whether or not you want to go in the corporate world or you want to go be an entrepreneur. That's just the mentality that you need to have, because again, all these things, even when you go into the corporate world, right, and you're like, okay, I landed this awesome job at this awesome tech company where I always thought I wanted to be. You get into it and you look around, and you're like, well, now wait a minute, this isn't what I thought it was going to pan out to be. I thought it was going to be awesome, and I was going to do X, Y, and Z, and then it's almost, kind of like an Army 2.0,
Yep.
and
Army with a tie.
that's it. That's it. Just that you're wearing a different uniform, right? It's
Yeah.
actually it's actually becomes harder than the Army because you have to make a decision on what you're going to wear that day. Whereas in the Army, it's just
Yeah.
throw on the camos, right? Throw on your field
Just
jammies.
easy.
You throw on your
Yeah.
field jammies and call it good. So no, I think that, man, that's such good insight. I think we talked about it on the episode with Joseph. Everybody, like, he calls them the instapreneurs, these guys that romanticize entrepreneurship, right? The idea of
Yeah.
like, oh, I'm going to be an entrepreneur, I'm going to go be a Mark Zuckerberg or like a Bill Gates or an Elon Musk, and it's like I personally, part of why I'm doing this podcast series is to kind of shed a light onto that of like being an entrepreneur doesn't mean you're going to go make billions and billions of dollars, but what it does is, it, to your point, like the rich dad poor dad, like all this different, it provides a different lifestyle. Sure, is there a school of hard knocks that comes with it? Yes, but eventually, if you do it right and you lay the right foundation, and to your point, you keep learning and you keep getting better, you're going to find yourself in that opportunity where you're working for yourself and you can turn the faucet on or off as much as you want throughout certain stages of your life.
Yep.
And and I don't know, even I again worked for a company, and now that I'm kind of like really diving into entrepreneurship life, I'm like, look, I honestly don't want to work for a person ever again. There's this awesome freedom that comes with doing your own thing. And now it's scary, it's scary because you're like, oh, if I mess up, it's on me. It's me, myself, and I. But if I'm successful, it's like, this is pretty awesome. So yeah,
I
I don't know,
think
like how has that mentality shaped in your brain as well? As you, like, I know you said you could always go get a job, but there's just always that mentality. And I don't know, like, if that's something that stemmed from the Army for me, whereas like I just was under command, and it's like I never got to be a commander. I left before that. But yeah, like what kind of, how did that mentality shape in your head? Because I think that is a mentality that is kind of, it evolves from certain aspects of just your previous lifestyle.
Yeah, so you said something before, and I've always had this thing. I think I saw it on like a TikTok or like some YouTube short, and it was Will Smith, and he said, and I don't know if it was like his original quote or something, but he talks about, he's like, the best things in life are on the other side of fear, and I have had that burned into my brain for the reason of like, um, it's just like the world, the universe, whatever it is, it rewards you for overcoming that fear,
Mm,
right? You go skydiving, you're horrified, and then it rewards you with like the most incredible like experience ever, right? Like you go out and you do uh, if just whatever it is that you fear, when you overcome that, that's like once you hit that little mountain peak and you get over that fear, that's when the really good stuff
mm,
like really starts to happen,
mm,
because I can't like really explain how it feels, but every time I've felt like, man, I shouldn't be doing this, like this is a lot of money down, or like, what are you doing? As soon as I just attack that and get like, just like, I don't want to say like take the hill, but like as soon as you just make progress towards that, I've repeated times over and over again. I feel fear, now I lean into it.
mm.
Like, and it's just so, Tim Ferriss talked about it in his book 4 Hour Work Week. He does like comfort challenges,
Yeah.
and he would go up and talk to like a random girl and just attempt to get her number. That's like what he talked about. He's like, I felt fear, like, like, and I was like, that's an attractive girl. Like, guys just get scared for whatever reason. They're like, hey, my name's Tim. I think you're very attractive. Let me get your number. That, or like walking across the bar to somebody, that is like that pit of misery from like here to there is horrifying for a lot of people.
Yeah.
And whether it's also like high net worth individuals, like people that are out of your comfort zone, the more repetition you build up in doing those small little uncomfortable things, the more it just becomes, wow, I didn't die. This is not bad. Oh, that was it. Like, but then like it opens the door to all these great things,
Yeah.
and just I think I went on a tangent there, but I was like
No, you're good.
that um simple principle of doing uncomfortable things has yielded me, I think, the most return in the last couple of years. Outside of monetarily and everything else, none of that really, that's like the sprinkles on top. That's like the bonus.
Yeah.
What I've gained in the last couple of years is tremendous confidence in my ability to get through things.
Mm.
And when you establish that mindset, Harmozy talks about it, it's like you build up, like success comes. It's not like, a bunch of money. It's just when you prove yourself over and over and over again, now you earned like a seat at the table. It's like when you build up that repetition, and even if it's small stuff,
Yeah.
right? Like you build up that repetition, it's you put it in a file cabinet in your brain, and then when you get scared again, open up the file drawer and just pull something out, right? And then like, I left the army and I didn't have a job, and I didn't, I made it. I made it a year, right? That's a huge little feather in your cap for me. It's like even if I have to go back and everything falls apart, I go get a job. Hey, I made it a year. I did something uncomfortable and I tried.
Mm-hmm.
And I just didn't want to have that regret of like, I can regret say, oh man, that was dumb. I think everybody has that, but I didn't want the regret of like I had the opportunity to do something and I didn't do it
Mm-hmm.
because I was
Yeah.
scared.
Yeah.
And I rationalized that in my brain. I was like, I can't do that. Like I have to try. And I think that if transitioning service members just understand that if they really seek knowledge and seek to improve themselves, forget the money just from the start. It's important. You need money to live. I understand that. But if you really focus on what am I learning and how can I apply this to my thing, whatever it is
Yeah.
in the future, a lot of the principles are the same. And you can pick anything up on YouTube. You can get like a PhD on like YouTube, and
That's
it's
so
free.
true. That's so
It's
true.
incredible. Like it's the most amount, and now you got Chat GPT and all these other crazy things. Like, dude, there's so much information out there. You can figure out how to do basically anything and just apply energy and enthusiasm, and then add time, and you got it.
Yeah. No, that's such amazing insight too. I think it just that's I think there's this paralysis that happens to again going kind of back to what I said earlier, where it's like it's just like where people talking about, okay, well, I need to do this XYZ, and it's just even with people who like, well, I need to go get my MBA to go do this thing, and I'm like,
I got a
I
story for that.
yeah, it's like okay, yeah, sure, like maybe you got to go get your MBA, like, but I think to your point, it's there's so many resources out there, and it's you need to like reshape this mentality of I don't need to be perfect to be successful. I think we get again, and I'm just gonna hit on this again. It's something that I'm struggling through, not struggling through, but I'm processing through right now, especially as I try and grow Five and Fly and create this community for people. It's like,
Yeah,
there's this, to your point, right? It's like going up and asking that attractive girl for her number. For me, it's like, hey, I'm creating this community and I have no idea, like I'm putting my heart and soul into it, and I don't know if you guys are gonna like it or not, but I'm gonna put it out there. And there is that fear of like, I'm gonna be judged and people are gonna judge this, and but it's
dude,
like,
that
hey,
is
guess
the
what?
truth. That's the biggest thing. That like external judgment is, I feel that on a like molecular level. It's
Yeah.
one of the biggest forces that stops people. But if
Yep.
you like, you're doing it, man. Like you're we're here. Like
Yes.
we're doing things, And I look at it from like that thing that you just said hits like I get like chills because it is if you just enjoy doing that thing,
Mm.
add time, and if this is effortless for you, you're in the right place because that's how I like if it like I started on TikTok crazy, right? Like I was like 32, 33 and they're like Gary V, I watched his thing at the beginning of COVID. He's like post on LinkedIn and post on TikTok and just be consistent. So all of my stuff that I posted, I can do that infinitely. And if it comes naturally to you, just add time and be consistent and it happens. And
Yeah,
it is because if you're a great conversationalist, like you just have a good like if you can just do that, it resonates with people. People wanna be like liked. You ask great questions. It seems natural. And it's like just add time and you get there.
man, I really appreciate it. Yeah, it's I, I again, like I try to be as humble as possible when I talk to people, but I have had a lot. The reason why I say this is interesting because personally, I am very introverted, and I would have never thought in a
Really?
million years
I
that
would have never guessed that.
exactly right. And it's I was watching this clip the other day of like Leonardo DiCaprio before I think it was kind of like a scene where he was about to hop on to like recording a set for Wolf on Wall Street, and
Yeah.
he like sits there, and I mean if anybody's seen Wolf on Wall Street, you guys, Leonardo DiCaprio absolutely crushes his role in that.
Yep.
And if you look at it and him talking about it, he goes into it and he like does this exercise, kind of closes his eyes, and then he's like I black out for the whole scene. I become the character, and then after the scene, I'll like watch it and I'll be like, I don't even remember any of that. And
Yeah.
so in this, but to your point, again, I really appreciate the affirmation there, man. I do really enjoy doing this. Is to me, it's like I've always told people that to me, if nobody else listens to this conversation, I am so thankful for this conversation. So again, I really appreciate it. This is, I always tell, I wouldn't say effortless, but it doesn't feel like work. It doesn't feel like work. And
No.
that's what
And
that's what I love about this.
the one thing that I started paying attention, I was just like, I need to learn as much as I possibly can about everything and just put that in my brain. Like open up the file door, file it away. And the thing that like the time that we're in right now, content is king.
Mm-hmm.
And you record one thing, you have an infinite amount of short form content. It can be, just create to begin with, but then you can monetize it like 10 years down the line.
Yep.
You can take all these, like, I thought about this when I first got started, and I was like, I was kind of the same way. Like, I didn't like being on camera. I always thought it was like kind of cringy and it's like, like the basics, like, that guy, like,
Yeah.
but once I started doing it, I had to live by that principle of if I feel uncomfortable, I have to lean into it. And then for me, it is the best diary, journal, documentation of your life because I remember vividly that I will never forget this. There was this lieutenant. He was in a sister platoon when I was in the 101st, and I remember being on deployment, and they're all like man's men, like they're infantry
Yep.
guys in the 101st, like light and right. And he was out there taking pictures, and he had this like great. It was like a nice camera, but I in my brain I was judging him, and I was like, dude, this kid's like a nerd and blah blah blah, like younger Corey, right? And and dude, I regret he had it right. Period. He was doing the thing. I have like no pictures because I thought I was too cool, and I don't care about sharing them with anybody else. But for me, like I would scroll through my pictures and I saw like a picture of my chew. It was like a dumpster. It was like a
Yeah.
little bed. It was like really small, but I was like, oh man, and it instantly brought back all those memories of like I would go in there, I could smell it, like it
Yeah.
was crazy. And content is that thing, and like if you can make it organically and just talk or be yourself in it, I think you'll eventually find your audience. And
Yeah.
that's how because I make a decent amount and I try and get better all the time, but I just listen to the greats that talk about content
Hmm.
and it's the way.
That's it.
It is like it's so light and it's so there's no you don't have to have the real estate. You don't have to have the sticks and bricks and everything else. It's a video.
Yep.
And people will pay for the information over time. pretty much monetize anything, but that the creation behind it is another thing that I try to focus on.
Mhm.
But more so than anything, it's a journal of
That's
where
it.
your life was, and it's a really good look back and litmus test back into like your life, like where you started on this day, all these crazy guests, and then in the future you've got a massive podcast studio, you've got all this stuff, right? And you've got these big heavy hitter guests, and it's really cool for me to think in my life about that. So
No,
I just I think content is has to be a part of everybody's life. If
that
you want to do anything business related, and for transitioning guys, like just make content.
yeah.
There's not that many military, like active duty service member accounts. It's wide open, and
Yep.
the audience loves it.
Yep.
They like love seeing military and like army content
Yep.
because most people don't get to see it.
Yep. No, that's so true. Yeah, I mean, Court has said best there, guys. Just that I 100% resonate with that. I wish I could go back, and I wish I had just kind of filled myself throughout the journey of trying to get a job, because it's like people, like there is something about that raw, unfiltered, like, hey guys, here's the actual truth behind, here's the underside
People
of the
resonate with
iceberg.
it.
Yeah. And that's I mean, that's so true. Now, I would say let's this conversation has been absolutely amazing and such good insight, and I definitely want to dive into so early riser stays,
Yeah.
the company that you were rocking and rolling with. You said you kind of started the foundation while you were in Savannah, right? Again,
Yep.
building this library of knowledge in your head, reading books, doing research, trial and error, learning. Um, so yeah, kind of dive into, again, kind of talking about this content, this raw and filtered journey of, okay, yeah, this is like where I was. This is young Corey trying to figure this thing out. Yeah, like so how did that go? Let's unpack that.
Yeah. So I get up here. So Savannah it was really simple. It was my apartment. I had two extra bedrooms, and it was a split. It was a shared bathroom, and I rented those out as two separate units. And basically paid the rent. And I'd watched another classmate of mine, him and his wife. They had built a really good portfolio down there. I saw some of their stuff, and I was like, man. Once I saw Columbus, I was like, I can do this here. So I get up here, and I'm pitching like landlords. Like I have no sales experience whatsoever, like nothing.
Yeah.
And I'm like getting turned down left and right. I'm like, how am I going to get these units? Like I didn't buy anything yet. Like, so I ended up we put about, before we like blew up, like, and not blew up good, blew up like the, like the, what was a Zeppelin,
Oh yeah. I know what you're talking
big
about, the
blimp,
Hindenburg or whatever.
the Hindenburg. Yeah, it went down like the Hindenburg. And like we had 6 units, and I remember I was like, I read the books, I did the thing, and then I was like, oh my God, like there's stuff coming. Like the in February of 2020, our pre-bookings, I had never seen that much bookings or money in my, it was the biggest month in a single month that I've ever made in my life. And we were at 40% occupancy. I'll remember these statistics forever. 40% occupancy in February, and we had 6 units. So we had another 60% occupancy across all of our units before the month even started. At 40%, we were putting away like 10 grand.
Wow.
Like that's after expenses, everything. It was wild. And I was like, all right, maybe it's too good. But I was excited because the Arnold was in March, and that's a massive travel event up here
Yep.
in Columbus.
Yeah.
So it was great. And it's like, we invested our initial money, bought some furniture, got the units up and running. And we were like that month and maybe like into April of 2020, we would have paid all that down and been profitable in like 6 to 7 months, 8 months.
Wow.
So then blackout, like COVID, and I'm every day, ding, 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 like somebody had canceled, and I lost 100% of our reservations, like all of them gone. Nobody's traveling, nobody's renting, nothing. And it was a bloodbath. Like I had all the money that we had saved up in our account basically down to zero. We ended up kind of like putting some holes in the dam. I had some other short-term renters. like subleasing, and I'm like trying to not drop all the glass balls because we had, we started on rental arbitrage, which was
Okay.
great in
Yeah.
good times, and not so great because you don't have equity.
Yeah.
You don't have equity in the properties or anything. You can't rent them really long term. And we were owing rent. So over the next couple of months, we basically bled some cash and got out of some of those leases with the landlords. I guess some COVID stimulus money kicked in for them. They let me out. So that was thankful for that. I think I had felt the pain that needed to be felt.
Hmm.
So then I wound up in this really interesting spot of I'm a commissioned officer making, almost major pay, senior captain's pay, and I'm an instructor. I was in like Middle Earth, and I was teaching from home, so I didn't go to the office. So I
Okay.
had full-time active duty pay, and we didn't go to the office for 6 months.
Wow.
So that time was like I licked my wounds for a couple days, and then I was like, okay, what can I do from here? I can make content, I can study, I can learn, I can research, I can set up on MLS listings, I could start hunting for properties. And I basically set it to where like I was going to go look for another stuff. So during that time, I basically tried to buy as much real estate as I could, which was horrendously risky.
Yeah.
But interest rates were like two and a quarter,
Yeah.
2.5, 3%. They were like basically negative.
Yeah.
And so that time allowed me to pivot into long term. And, I had a couple of the short terms that I ended up buying. And then I built a small like foundation of my own personal stuff.
Hmm.
So that allowed me to have the peace of mind of like, okay, I can always fall back on this stuff. So built a better base. And then once we came out of COVID, I was like, I'm not done. I like doing this. I still think it has value, and I want to stand back up on my feet. So end of um, end of 21, really beginning of 22, we had 0 units.
Hmm.
Built it from 0 to 18 in a year. We acquired a very large unit, which was I don't know if you believe in like the law of attraction and like all this other stuff, but going into COVID, we had talked about this large property. It was a 13 unit complex right in Short North. Never signed anything, but we were like basically going to get it. Obviously, COVID happened, and it didn't happen, right?
Hmm.
Stay the course, almost a year and change to the day. Sorry, 2 years to the day. Get a 13 unit under contract. Crazy. That blew my mind because I was just like, you stand up again, right? Fall down, 10, stand up 11. So got that under contract. And then that was like our big project to get started. So we had 18 units, building out systems. Internally for the company, I was like, okay, what do I see that other Airbnb short-term rental companies aren't doing? And what can be our special sauce? And I basically came to the conclusion cleanliness and communication. Some of the Airbnbs I've stayed in with decent ratings, they're kind of disgusting.
Yeah.
And, Sammy, right? Like, I hate to be brutal, but like, you learn a really good cleanliness standard in the army.
Yeah.
And I know that I could, inspect the good parts or like the parts that are going to get hit a lot, the sinks, the toilets, the bathrooms. And we can provide a fantastic product that's clean.
Mm.
And then also one of the stigmas about, Airbnb specifically, hosts don't get back to you.
Mm.
So I would just hawk my phone. Like as soon as something came in, I'd respond back. Or, as we built and we grew the team, we'd respond back.
Yeah.
And not automated, it was a human, right? So I focused on those, and that's what helped us get our reviews up, and we make really good recommendations. It wasn't rocket science.
Yeah.
We had clean units in great locations, and we communicated effectively.
Yep.
And that's how we really got started getting our reviews. I think we're up to like almost, I don't know, a couple hundred, 700 now.
Wow.
And we're looking to continue to grow. But that was like, once I built that in 22, I left in the middle of 22. So 3 months into it, I left the army and I was like, I'm doing this full time. I was like, I got enough traction where I
Yeah.
was just like, we're doing good enough. I'm betting it all on Corey and Co. And I'm gonna see what happens. So that was kind of like quick down and dirty on like how I got started, from up, down. I call it like the pit of misery. You're down there, all the chips are down, and then just kind of built it back slowly, and now it's growing.
It's rocking and rolling, man. That's so cool. I think I love a good. I mean, to me, I think this is one of the most. The thing that I love most about this podcast is I get to have these conversations that shed light on these stories that are out there that people don't hear about. Right, like right now, people probably are going to go on Corey's LinkedIn and whatever they're gonna see like, oh yeah, like here's the success, here's what he's doing. I want to do that, and then I'm able to shed light to it's like, okay, here's the realistic picture. Not saying that people can't do it, but it's like, hey, there isn't like a set path. It's just to your point exactly. You don't know what's going to happen, and you just stay true to the course. And again, kind of like the reoccurring theme in this podcast episode is just stick to it, grind it out, understand who you are and what you're able to offer, and then right. It's like use the 80% to focus on the 20%. Right. It's like figure
Yep.
out what you do 20% well, and then focus the rest of the 80% on that. And and that's just what you're doing.
Outsource the rest. Find somebody who's better than you, and let them do it.
So Corey, you've mentioned quite a few, resources that you've leaned on in your time. I would so there, again, somebody who's not in the short term, long term real estate business, but is honestly intrigued by it. I think that's something as I grow capital and get used to it. Like I said, we've talked about it. So to all listeners
Yeah.
out there, you guys know I live in Georgetown, Texas. I love this town. I'd love to kind of provide again an outlet for people to come and visit this beautiful city that I love and be a part of the festivities that are going on here. We have a lot of cool stuff. Just that's an awesome. There's so many things you can come do and see here. And so what? Give me give the listeners, give me two really awesome resources that you've continually relied on and gone back to in this journey.
Specific to like what the Army provides, or just in general?
I would say just like anybody who's like, hey, you know what, I want to jump into the short term real estate biz, like what exactly what you're doing, and
Yeah.
like good resources to help them figure out how to do that.
So, okay, so this sounds crazy, but this is where I do all my learning. So there is a great side of TikTok, and then there's also the mindless scrolling side. So I set a rule for myself. So I learned this a little while ago, and I apply it. I try to apply it daily. So your success in life is directly correlated to how quickly and efficiently you can intake information, process it, and turn it into something,
Mm,
and make it like the practical application of knowledge. So what I started seeing on TikTok early on was I didn't follow any you know like sugar accounts where they were just like it's like a quick high, you're watching these silly videos or whatever. I only followed people that I knew that I would learn from,
mm,
and I filled my feed up with I dude like real estate, right? Drywall, fencing, HVAC, all these like tech, like not like tech, but like the technical side of like
yeah.
building stuff. I filled it up with other successful Airbnb hosts, short-term rentals, real estate investors, um, people that were 50 steps ahead of me, 100 steps ahead of me, and learning. So that might be like a little unconventional, but I honestly have to say, using some form of social media, for me, it just happened to be TikTok because I was creating and then I was consuming and learning. And that is the best place that I've found. If you use that method, if you follow the right people
Yeah.
and don't end up on the mindless scrolling, and you set limits for yourself, but you can just apply that to any form of social media, YouTube Shorts. The amount of practical information in there is unreal. It's free. You can get it if you're in the field and you have service, you're learning.
Yep.
If you're on like you find those like micro time periods, like 15 minutes into work, 15 minutes back, you go on Audible and you listen to an audiobook,
Mm,
and it's an 8-hour audiobook, right? I learned just I could amp up the speed and still understand it. And if you layer that with, I read this article, thought it was interesting. Apparently, you can read you retain 10% of what you read and 20% of what you hear.
hmm.
So the way I realized that, or the way I applied that, was if you have an 8 hour audiobook and you listen and you can listen to it on 2x speed, you get to listen to that book twice in 8 hours.
Mm,
And if you're doing a 15-minute drive in, that's actually 30 minutes of content.
yeah.
And you can double that up. So number one is all of the audio or all of the content places where you can find knowledge. Any of them, that is like the number one thing that I would use is finding the right people that are doing what you want to do, following those accounts, engaging with their content. You'd be surprised. Like I would text or I would leave comments, and they would do reply videos. So I get my question answered, and it was great. So I would say number one, because it's free, you can get access to it anywhere, and there is so much information out there. It's ridiculous. And then number two, I don't know. That first part was like real, like that's where I got most of my stuff.
Yeah.
I would say number two is directly with people.
Mm,
Like there is nothing, um, somebody digests. Like this is the beauty of like, let's say I've done a real estate, let's say I've done 150 properties.
yeah.
So resource one, I can go out and try and learn the stuff myself,
Mhm.
right? That's a way. But now you get smarter and you just ask Corey and I teach you. Even if you have to pay, you pay for the information, you get it packaged, and it's like, here you go, here's the golden brick of knowledge. Save you hundreds of hours of scrolling and learning and iteration. Go find somebody, even if you don't get paid, or the real stuff is where you pay. Do your due diligence. Don't buy like, you know, crap courses. Do your own research and look for verified, like trusted people,
Mhm.
and pay for the information or go seek them out, LinkedIn, Instagram, DMs, whatever. Ask them for their knowledge, create value first. They will give you it. People
Mhm.
want to share their story and they want to share their knowledge and pass it on.
Mm,
Those two resources, very broad, but like getting the information off the internet, it's free, but people are going to be your number one
mm,
resource.
yeah.
Specifically, like the career skills program, the skill bridge is in that time. If you can set that up, I remember as a company commander, this is like probably one of my like most proud accomplishments was, how it gets at the end. They're like trying to nickel and dime you, like, oh, you got to come into us. I signed everyone when I was a company commander. I signed every single one because I knew how valuable it was. I
Mhm.
knew that soldier, NCO, or whoever, they're not going to show up to work. They're on their way out.
Yeah.
I signed every single one, and they all reached back to me and was like, "Hey, I'm really appreciative of like you signing that. Like that really, really helped me out."
Yeah.
Um, Go do that. It's great if you walk into a job and get trained, but just go if you're trying to go the entrepreneurial route or whatever it is, go seek the knowledge, get the hands-on training while you're covered under the army.
Mm,
Because the army will pay you. That's part of the program. That's the initiative is 90 to 180 days. You're good. Go seek that knowledge from people that are doing the things that you want to do. I would
yeah.
say those are the top two things. That's a great question.
Yeah. That's it was an awesome, absolutely awesome answer. I think as me personally, I'm a big, I love listening to Audible and listening to a bunch of audio books. It's like just get, it's, yeah, it's just easy. Like I'm a big golfer and, if I'm ever playing around by myself, I'll just literally throw my AirPods in and I'll just like listen to an audio book while I'm playing.
Yep.
And it's very like
Just
methodical for
compounding
me.
your time.
That's it. And, and so that's great insight. And man, I mean, and not to and again not I'm not saying that Daniel is the SME at Transition Out Military, but that's another reason why I'm starting Five and Fly because that was what I was doing. I was spending copious like I don't want to say wasting, but I will say it's there was a borderline right there. It's kind of this gray area of like I don't like I'm just trying to figure out what the heck to do, and you spend so much time figuring out even where to start, and then by the time you get there, you're like you start to kind of run out of time, and so to all listeners out there, that's what I'm trying to do at Five and Fly. I'm really trying to take all this information, compound it in there, and then create this community where people can come in and share the information of like, well, I found this over here and I found that over there, and then take that and then turn that information around, and again, can like continue to compound that information to digestible amounts. So then once you guys coming behind, come into the community, you're like, oh wow, like
Yeah.
here's like a pretty dang good lockstep, gunnery procedure for those
Yeah.
FA guys out there. I was never an FDO. Thank
I stayed away
goodness.
from it, man. That was the miracle of my career.
That was
I,
it.
I, by some act of God, I didn't end up because I told, small aside here, it was crazy the way this happened. It's worth mentioning on that vein. So when I finished my FSO time, they told me I was going to be the battalion command or the battalion FDO. And the first thing I said was, "We're gonna shoot out." I was like, I like barely made it through gun. I was like, not a chance that this is not a good idea. I'm not your math guy. Like I say that all the time. So we transitioned from light to heavy. So I was a battalion FDO for 2 months, and we didn't have any guns. And I sat in the three shop. I took the safety test. Again, I don't know how I passed it, but I did. And then I got that job to go be a company commander up at Stewart or up at Hunter, and that was it. I never did FDO. I had like the technical like I was it for like 2 months, and then I was like, nah, dude, this is not for me. And I went and did something else. So, but it was
Uh,
crazy. It was very fortunate for probably most people that that I was not behind the FDC. But
oh
I
man.
always thought that was funny because I was like, I never want to do this. Like I remember being in FA Bullock, I was like, this is just not for me, man. Like,
Yeah, I remember when I was a PL of a firing platoon of howitzers, and they're like, most platoons go hang out in the FDC, and I was like, nah, I'm gonna go hang out in the guns,
yeah,
shoot the breeze
yeah,
with the
I got to
shoot
be
shoot the
out.
breeze with the chiefs, and hang out in the guns, and watch crew drills and stuff like that. Like I was not the guy I mean. Much appreciation for those FDOs, FTCs out there. I was around some absolute, whiz kids, man. I had this
Yeah,
man, I could go on for days, but back to that point, really kind of creating this lockstep procedure, if you will, of okay, in each vertical, each industry, each field, if that's what you want to do, here's what needs to get done, and here's like some tips and tricks, like here's some things you
proof the
might have,
lane.
yeah, and just
Like
be
just,
that
just show
pathfinder.
them the lane. Hey, this is what. Yeah, like I think of it as um, you build content, you build network, you build community, and that's why I think we get along. So because like we're both going in like the end of my journey, like where I wanted to be is I just wanted to say, look at me. If I can do this, I promise you, you can do this.
Yep.
Like most, like when I this is crazy, but when I was an ROTC instructor, I talked about this a lot
Yeah.
because I remember the ROTC curriculum, the West Point like they're built to produce officers.
Yep.
However, I felt like morally obligated throughout life. If you ask most people what are they fearful of and what concerns them the most, it's money.
Mm-hmm.
Whether, because they don't know how it works, they don't know how it flows, they don't know they can create it themselves, they don't know how to create value outside of just working in a system. And I felt like I had to teach these kids, like, listen, you can listen to me, don't listen to me. I have to tell you this so my conscience is clean. Because had I started earlier, it would have been, and I'm very blessed to where I started and where I went.
Mm-hmm.
But as opposed to going like, I shut everything else down and just grew. I didn't go out. I lockstep. I like 2 or 3 years, just nose to the grindstone. But that's not sustainable for a lot of people.
Yeah.
So if you started early, like right when you get out of college, like I have this formula. I don't know, it doesn't have a name, but I just think of it this way. So my number is 36. I was a 36 in college. Everything I do revolves around that number. So it's like it's a 360 formula, if you want to call it that. So 365 days in a year, let's say you cut out those five, take vacation, 360 days in a year, right? 10% of that is 36 days. So for those 36 days out of the year, that's what you have to do. Those 36 days, you work 10-hour days, which basically breaks down to, 30 hours or so a month, which breaks down to a little bit less than an hour a day. So if you start where I started and just do 10 years or 5 years or whatever it is, if you start 1 hour a day doing real estate and do that consistently for 10 years, you don't even have to buy anything. You will get, because you compounding knowledge, right?
Yep.
Einstein said compounding interest is the most powerful force in the world. I think it's compounding knowledge. But if you can do that and pick whatever it is, it could be podcasting, it could be creating content. The first hour that you spend the next day, you compound on that. And now you've compounded every day for 10 years. That is, in my opinion, the best way. Start on your way in, and it's a much easier glide path to getting out. Then you have the repetitions, you have the confidence, like 35, 40 minutes, an hour a day.
Yeah.
And that's an audiobook on the way in and out. That counts.
Yep.
If you're just learning something and then God forbid you go out there and try something and do it in the real world outside of the army, that's it.
Yep.
Pick something and just be like, what do you like doing? Go in that direction and just build that on the side. You will be able to, like, if you're an officer in the army, even enlisted, it doesn't matter. If you're serving in the military, you're competent enough to do that. And that's the best, in my opinion, that's the best way of transitioning, because if you only know how to go get another job and fill out your resume and do everything else, if you don't get a job, you're scared. You have it leaves that, like, that's your only way forward.
Yep.
But if you know that there's two paths and you know how to use both of them, pick the one that works best for you. And just think of it that way. Yeah. But you can really, like, it's a Japanese business principle. It's called, I think it's Kaizen.
Yep.
Kaizen.
Yep.
Slow, small, boring, methodical process or progress over time. That's it.
Yep.
Just do that, and you will, like, I come from, like, my thought process, I pretty much same as you, is like, I want to teach people to help themselves.
Yep.
Because if you, like, give them a fish, eat for a day, teaching a fish, eat forever, right? Like, if you can teach people how to help themselves through transition, that's it.
Yeah.
That's how I think, is like, I want to be the test dummy and be like, look, man, I did this. Here's the lessons I learned. You got to go struggle. You've got to go through the pit of misery, experience it. I can give you some tips. Like, I can walk you up to the door. I can't walk through it for you. You got to do that. That's where you take hold of, like, your ownership. And then once you start, you turn your worldview 180 degrees and you own everything that happens to you in your life.
Yep.
And ownership for everything. I had this, I say this a lot, my lacrosse coach in college, he had the finger pointing analogy, and he would always, and I always knew that, like, he had two things. He said, and I remember these, he had the finger point. So it's like, if you point your finger, no, Dan's the problem. There's three fingers that point back to why Corey's the problem, right?
Yep.
And then he always said, you're either helping us or you're hurting us. Now, academically, I was usually hurting. I was the anchor. I was not the guy that was like, hey, I'm on the dean's list, like, right?
Yeah.
But if you apply those two simple principles of, like, dude, there's 3 reasons that you can fix internal to yourself that will help you go forward. And then if you come from the mindset, you're either getting yourself better and helping the team, or you're bringing us down. There's no neutral in life. There's no stagnation. Just stick to those 2 and put those, like, embed those in your mind. And it's like, I'm going to get out and I'm going to do whatever it is that I want to do. But if you adopt that mindset, you're invincible. Yeah. Like, you can't be stopped, because it's ever expanding, not like canalizing.
Man, I couldn't have said that better myself. That's Corey's coming out here with the hard hitters today, folks. So if you there's so much information, so much knowledge that's been dropped on this podcast episode, and Corey, I'm so thankful
absolutely for
you coming.
I'm glad you enjoy it. I like sharing. I learned a ton from you too. Even our conversation the other day, like, you just get around like-minded people and just good things happen.
That's it. That's the key. And that's exactly what Corey's talking about. It's there becomes this thing where once you get around, you are a product of who you are with. And that's crucial,
Yeah,
especially as you get out. And
absolutely.
I think part of and I fell into some holes where it's you kind of fall into some of these holes where not that I'm saying these people are bad, they just have a lot of negative energy, and you start to pick up on that negative energy and you start to internalize that, and then once you pull yourself from that negative energy, you unlock this potential that you know that you have and that you can exceed to. And right, with Doc Z, like he tells us, right, construct
Oh
your
yeah.
present, set your bar high, man, set your bar high, and don't
Yep.
succumb to anything less. If you haven't listened
Absolutely.
to that podcast episode, do
Oh,
yourself a
I did.
favor.
As soon as you sent, I listened to it immediately. It took me right
I
back. I heard his voice, and I was like, man, like it's
when
so he
he
was so helpful to me in my time there.
man, he when he came on, I just like immediately just had this sense of like I can accomplish anything, because that's what it was. I mean, that Doc Z, and to the listeners out there, if you haven't listened to it, go back and listen to it. It's it that man, I don't know, he is like, I don't understand it, but he unlocks internal potential that I can't even, like, I mean, in that episode I was talking, right, like I went through this crucible of I got benched so I started all 4 years playing football as a kicker, got benched my freshman year, just I really started to kind of have self-doubt, went through spring ball, and basically Coach Ellerson came to me, he's like, hey dude, like if you might not be on a team if you don't have a good summer camp. And I was like, well, this sucks. And then I talked to Doc Z, and I was like, hey Doc, here's my circumstance. He's like, all right, let's just. He's like, you were a starting kicker, so you obviously have the skills. It's probably this thing in between your shoulders, in between your
He
ears.
just gets you out of your own way.
That's it. And he unlocked it, and the rest is history. Now, Corey, again, like I said, thank you so much for coming on. We're gonna land this plane here, and
Absolutely.
what I like to do when I land the plane is, I think this is to me, this is one of the most crucial things for anybody who's getting ready to get out of the military. I always say start with why. Why do you want to get out of the military? And if that foundation, and it can't be I want to go make money, I want to work at X company, I want to do X thing. It can't be that. It's got to it needs to be something that's tangible and something that people can hold you accountable to. But it can't be those things, because money, job, titles, those are fleeting. Those come and
Yeah.
go. And so Corey, we're gonna finish off this episode. What was your why to getting out of the military?
Yeah, sure. So I had like kind of two. They're all kind of intertwined. But so the way I looked at my life, towards the end of the army, everybody knows it gets kind of bureaucratic, it gets real, tight and congested. And I didn't feel like I felt like my course, like my initial life goal, it had come to an end, and it kind of, died off. And I didn't feel the same passion that I had when I was younger.
Hmm.
Um, and I was just like, somebody told me a while ago, when you lose that passion, it's time to go do something else.
Hmm.
So I tried thinking back. It was like the last year of my life, or last year before I got out. I thought back to what little Corey, like young Corey, growing up playing lacrosse in the backyard, like what did he like doing? And I always liked playing in the dirt. I liked building. I was always tinkering with stuff. I loved like using tools and like ripping out drywall, like all this. Like I always loved cutting the lawn. It sounds like really monotonous and like plain, but I was just like, if goal number one, right, go be in the army and play lacrosse. Started with playing lacrosse and be in the military. That if that had run its course, what else does younger Corey like?
Hmm.
And I just looked internally first. It's like, what do I want to do? Like, what do I genuinely like? And what I saw was what I was doing. I genuinely loved it. Like that, I was making like the guy I am today is the one that I think like younger Corey would be like proud of, because like
Hmm.
I'm doing the stuff outside of the army and lacrosse. Today I'm doing the stuff. It's real estate. It's development. It's moving dirt around. It's sticks and bricks. It's hammering. Like I just like almost like the Forrest Gump like stories. Like I've got all this money. We don't have it yet, but like he's like I have all this money, but I love cutting the grass so much I did it for free. Like that's kind of like what younger Corey liked doing.
Hmm.
So I saw it as like that. And I was like, I want to make younger Corey, I want to go do something that would make younger Corey proud. And that also, I was like, I'm going to take care of future Corey, right? Because like it's going to be, you know, the unfortunate thing about the world today for humans is we have to pay to live.
Mhm.
And economically, things are getting tight. And then the second kind of part of this is I believe in my brain that I can build big businesses. I know from my background, I've lived in the sticks, I've been outside, I've been cold, wet, hungry. My living expenses and like my lifestyle is not lavish whatsoever. And I don't really ever anticipate changing that. But I heard this a while ago and I kind of live by this. So if you can, then you must.
Mm.
So I believe that I can build massive businesses, I can build real estate, and the thing about those businesses is I know that I can employ other people. When times get tight, I can build something where there's a torch and it's like, "Hey, I can give you gainful employment. I can teach you how to go start something great and do your own thing." And I really started to believe towards the end and now seeing where the economy and everything else is, I have a very, very firm belief that veteran business owners, they like if you can, you must. And that's kind of the rail that I went down. I was like, I can only influence and affect people in the army. If I'm a battalion commander, a couple hundred people, maybe a
Mhm.
thousand, right?
Mhm.
I really only touch that. But if you and I do a podcast or I start making more content, my influence on other people is much more vast. And if I learn the skills that I need to learn, I can help those people help themselves at a larger scale,
Yeah.
right? So I had to kind of figure out like, hey, I got to do it first and then explain and teach and coach.
Yeah.
And I just felt like if I can, then I must. I was
Mm.
like, most people will come to you. There's like an analogy somebody told me a while ago. It's like if somebody came to me and they had, $100,000 unrealized expense, and it was like somebody's like grandma or whatever it is. Like it could be an accident, whatever it was. Hey, I'm in desperate need of this 100 grand, right? I need this. Like this is life change. Like this is something bad's gonna happen if I don't get this. If I'm in the military while honorable, that's my year salary,
Yeah.
and I got my own expenses. So the way I looked at it is like if I want to be able to help people, most of the problems out there are monetarily. It's a monetary problem, right? So I live like if you can, you must. So if I have to build in order to pay for that, in order to help that person in that moment, I've got to build a $1 million+ company
Mhm.
to be able to have that money to write that check to give to that person and know, hey, don't pay me back. I'm doing this because I want to help you.
Mm.
And it's gonna it's it that has the ability to change people's lives. And if I can do that, and if I can help, and I believe that I do over time as I get better, then
Mhm.
I have to do that because
Yep.
I'm, dude, I'm so it's a grind every day, but when I wake up, I'm happy. Like I could live out of my truck and be super happy. Like I am happy. I'm doing the stuff that I want to do right now. That's it. I don't need any more money, but the thing that I see is I think other people are going to need help in the future, and if I'm going to help out other people, I have to do that.
Yeah.
I have to give them if I can build a business with gainful employment where they feel valued and like it's not that like toxic corporate work culture. If I think I can build that and I can, imagine like somebody actually likes doing what they're doing and you can build a better business around that. You can hire veterans and employ them, get them started and get them out on their own.
Yeah.
Like that, it's life changing. You can change other people's lives. So long, kind of long story there, but that's like the two things that I thought about the last year. I was like, just make younger Corey happy. Do the other things that he always liked doing, and I'm doing it right. It's a long road, but and then the other thing was like, I think a lot of people just always want to try and help other people, and if I can do that, like I could just go. I don't have to do any of it. I'm happy with what I have monetarily. I don't
Yeah.
need to do it. But
Mhm.
if I can, then I must. Like I'd be doing myself and other people because I believe that I can a disservice. And I was just like, I got to go do this. I gotta get out. I gotta try this, and I gotta try and like carry the torch and lead the way. So
Man.
it's a longer vision, but I felt that calling, and I was just like, dude, I'm gonna as scary as it is leaving without a job and everything else, and like betting it all on yourself, I was like, I know that at the end of the day, if I help one other person or I can change somebody's life, like that's like the cherry on top. Like that'd be very rewarding for me. So
No, that's no, that was absolutely amazing. I love that. I love the vision. I think especially as really to all the listeners out there, do yourself a favor and ask that question of what if you're thinking about getting out, even if you're thinking about getting out of the military, think to yourself, it's like, okay, what did young Daniel see himself doing, right now, and really kind of reflect through it. It's like, yeah, I was in the army, I got to blow stuff up, I got to do a lot of cool stuff, like that was awesome,
yeah,
you know, and I think the part of me was like, yeah, playing sports at a very high level, right? Played Division 1 football, right? Like, yeah, would it have been awesome to go to NFL? Sure, maybe, but whatever. It wasn't that good, and so there's that. But then to your point, it's like, what do I want to be doing 10, 15 years from now? And it's the same mindset. And so for me, it's if what's really cool about Five and Flies, I get to do that. I get to build a business around doing just that, helping people,
yeah,
paving the path, making it easy for them. I mean, I saw a statistic today on LinkedIn, Syracuse University, that they do have like the O2O program. They released the stat that veterans, I think, are at like 3.4%, um, 3.4% unemployed, which is they're saying it's going down, but I mean, it's my mission to help make that number 0%.
zero.
It
Yep.
should and it should be that. I think all veterans, no matter regardless of what they did in the military,
The
have so much value to provide to a company, and so
so
that's what we're trying to do.
so yeah. So on that vein, so I think the military gives you, it instills in you the intangibles of
Mm-hmm.
mental and physical toughness, which is such a big part of being an entrepreneur. The other stuff that it doesn't give you is the technical expertise and like the resources essentially. They give you some resources, but like the stuff that we're talking about is
Yeah.
like it's a different animal, but like the other stuff can be taught. The first part has to be experienced.
Yep.
You have to have shared suffering. You have to be like a servant, humble leader. And once you have those like experiences, the mental and physical toughness is there. That's 90% of the battle. Then you're like, what's real estate? Oh, this is technical. Like, how do you install this? Like, how do you can teach that stuff, and that's easy. The first part is like, you have such good stuff. Even if you don't think you have anything, you have a lot that
Mm,
is very, very transferable into either the workforce or starting your own thing.
mm,
And that's like one of the best things that I've seen. And I wish more people understood that because it's the truth.
yeah. No.
So awesome. I really appreciate you having me on, man. This was great.
No, this was Corey. Thank you so much. This was such an awesome conversation. Again, I love this. This is like, again, to your point, like, yeah, I'm waking up every morning, I'm grinding, and it's going crazy, but I love it. This is what this is it. This fuels me. This fills my cup, and I'm so excited. So to all listeners out there, this is going to be the second episode of the So You Want to Be an Entrepreneurship. Sorry, let's rephrase that. This is the second episode of the So You Want to Be an Entrepreneur series, and in it was awesome. There's going to be plenty more of these, so please stay tuned in. And then if you don't follow me, or you're not followed, please go follow me on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. Give me a rating if you think there's content, and then guys, leave comments. Let me know, like, hey, this is awesome. I want to hear more on this. Like, either we'll just bring Corey back and we'll just dive right into more short term rental stuff and the real estate world and unpacking that, or we'll do other stuff. So please leave a message and comment in on these podcast episodes. Corey, again, thank you so much for coming on. This is an awesome
Absolutely.
conversation. To all the listeners out there, guys, Corey said it best. It's all about getting out there. It's all about exposing yourself. It's all about learning. And remember, guys, as we sign off this episode, it'll buff.